Many productions of Hamlet eliminate the first scene. The one I was most recently involved in did. Edwin Booth, back in the 1800s, generally eliminated the first scene and started with the second. And there's a good reason for this. The first scene involves Horatio, Marcellus, Bernardo on the platform in front of the castle late at night, and the ghost just walking through and just generally scaring the hell out of all of them. Now, the reason it's often omitted is that at the end of the second scene, Horatio, Marcellus, and Bernardo proceed to describe to Hamlet everything that just happened in the first scene. So it's a little redundant. It does bring in some thoughts about the war that may or may not be about to break out. But depending on how you do the show, the war may not be that important. So a lot of times we begin with the second scene. The second scene may be the wedding reception for the king and queen. It may not be, too. It depends on how you stage it. Different directors stage it differently. It is, as often as not, the one scene in the play where the king and queen actually wear state crowns. Normally the king doesn't wear a crown at all. The queen may wear a small tiara or something like that. But the big crowns, the state crowns, are generally only seen in this scene. And the reason for this is this is a state occasion. Most of the rest of the play is just really family stuff. They're wandering around in the castle talking to each other. Polonius is saying something to the king and queen. Well, it's not a state occasion. He's just saying this is such and such has happened. That's his job. You know, he's the chancellor, the chief chamberlain, whatever you want to call him. So in the first scene, everyone is the most formally dressed, usually. And usually it is immediately following the wedding of Gertrude and Claudius. Now, how does he begin? Well, Claudius begins by making a speech to the assembled courtiers. He's, in a sense, justifying what's going on. He's justifying that he's getting married. He's justifying that it happened rather quickly. After all, his brother's only been dead a couple months, and here he is marrying his widow, his former sister-in-law. Now, there's an implication here. There's an implication that perhaps, regardless of how Hamlet remembers things, it wasn't that happy a marriage. There's an implication that perhaps the affair is longer standing than just, oh, my brother's dead, his queen looks hot, I think I'll hit on her. There's at least some implication that they've still been going at it for quite a while, actually. There are even some Shakespearean authorities who suggest they've been going at it so long that Hamlet is actually Claudius's son and not Hamlet's, which really throws things into a confusion. Because if that's the case, Hamlet is plotting to kill his actual father at the behest of his really uncle, who only thinks he's his father, or maybe knows he's not and wants to get back at him. There's lots of little plot twists we can throw into this thing. In any case, Claudius begins by making a short speech to justify what's going on. He says, "The yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe. Yet so far hath discretion fought with nature, that we with wisest sorrow think on him together with remembrance of ourself. Therefore our sometime sister, now our queen, imperial jointress to this warlike state, and this is a very important line. Imperial jointress is an extremely important line and would have been understood immediately by Shakespeare's audiences, even though it's not usually by ours. Because jointress had a specific legal meaning in Elizabethan law. Jointress was a widow who still had legal possession of her husband's property. In other words, it was a widow between the time her husband died and the end of formal mourning, at which point all of his property would then go to his heirs, which usually did not mean his wife. So in the case of the King of Denmark dying, for instance, the castle, Elsinore, where the queen is living, when King Hamlet dies, she owns the castle for a while, and then at the end of the mourning period, Hamlet will own it. Except in this case, she married during the mourning period, when she still had title to the castle, which means now it belongs to Claudius. And Hamlet won't get it, at least not until Claudius dies if he wills it to him. So that's a second reason for Hamlet to be pissed off at his uncle. Not just that he married his mother, but he also has his property. So, we found out what an imperial jointress is. He continues, the imperial jointress to this warlike state have we, as 'twere with defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth in funeral and dirge in marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole taken to wife. Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along, for all our thanks. And in the last production I was in, this is where this speech ended. In other productions, it goes on. He talks about young Fortinbras and his attempts to recapture, his desire to recapture, his demand to have turned back over to him the land his father lost to old Hamlet, which Claudius essentially describes and then just says, well, so much for him. And then it goes on, he sends ambassadors to old Norway, Fortinbras' uncle, telling him what his nephew's up to and asking him to get him to stop. Which, in those productions, he does. Kenneth Branagh notwithstanding. And then in our production, he continued, he talks to Laertes briefly. What do you want, Laertes? You asked for something. What do you want? Laertes says, I want to go back to Paris. Is it all right with your father? Sure. Father says, well, I don't really want to let him go, but yeah, fine, let him go back to school. And the king says, well, take thy fair hour, Laertes, time be thine, and thy best graces spend it at thy will. Then he turns, and now, my cousin Hamlet and my son. This is something you'll see throughout the play. Claudius almost always refers to Hamlet as his son. Now, whether this is confirmation of that minority opinion that the affair has been going on so long that Claudius actually is Hamlet's father, or he just loves his wife and consequently wants to be a good stepfather to his son, we don't know. We can't say. I'm somewhat inclined toward the latter myself. He has no reason to dislike Hamlet. He's the king. Hamlet isn't. If Hamlet's not the king, he's not a threat. Denmark, don't forget, at this time, had a council that decided which of the potential heirs would be the king. Why they chose Claudius, the brother, rather than Hamlet, the son, it isn't actually said. One possibility is simply that Hamlet was away in school in Germany when old Hamlet died. And Claudius was so he was there. There were some problems going on in the country, so you took the guy who's there, and not the guy who's 30 years old and still in college, and may just be kind of a royal slacker, for want of a better term. Now, Hamlet isn't really accepting this son thing. He just says, well, a little more than kin and less than kind. So Claudius asks, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? And Hamlet replies, not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun. A little bit of a pun there. You're calling me your son. I'm in the sun too much. All right, you got it, right. People often don't. I don't know why. The Queen... the Queen then says, well, Hamlet, why don't you, get out of mourning? We're getting back to normal. Why don't you do the same thing? And Hamlet talks about being, he's not done mourning. And then the king turns all fatherly on him. "'Tis sweet and commendable in your nature, Hamlet, to give these mourning duties to your father. But you must know your father lost a father. That father lost his. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. But to persever in obstinate condolement is a cause of impious stubbornness. 'Tis unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, a mind impatient, an understanding simple and unschooled. For what we know must be, and is, as common as any the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Fie, 'tis a fault to nature, a fault against the dead, to reason most absurd, whose common theme is death of fathers, and who still hath cried from the first course to he that died today, this must be so. We pray you throw to earth this unprevailing woe, and think of us as a father. For let the world take note. You are the most immediate to our throne, and with no less nobility of love than dearest father bears his son, do I impart toward you. Your intent at going back to school at Wittenberg is most retrograde to our desire, and we beseech you bend you to remain here, in the cheer and comfort of our eye, our chiefest courtier, cousin, and our son. His mother chimes in, stay. Hamlet says, I will in all my best obey you, madam, meaning he'll stay. And Claudius, to get him and Gertrude out of the scene, says, why, 'tis a loving and a fair reply. Be as ourself in Denmark. Madam, come. This gentle and unforced accord of Hamlet sits smiling to my heart, in grace whereof no jocund health that Denmark drinks today, but the great cannon to the cloud shall tell. The king's roused, the heavens shall bruit again with speaking earthly thunder. Come, away. And everybody walks out, and Hamlet starts complaining. Hamlet spends a lot of time complaining. That's what Hamlet does. He complains about things. He doesn't do anything, but he complains about everything. At this point, he's just feeling like, I don't really want to be here. I'm sad. My mother's remarried already. She didn't consult me, or at least not enough. He's a poor neglected child. He's 30 years old. He's damn near middle-aged, but he's still a poor neglected child. Hamlet's kind of a wuss when you go right down to it. No matter how dynamically he's played, he's still a poor little lost wussy, I can't bring myself to do anything type of guy. Until the last minute of the show, when he's already dying, then he finally does something. And here he starts complaining, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter. Oh God. God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world.